So welcome everyone to our members community meeting for Building Smart Canada, April 28th. We're pleased to welcome you. My name is Susan Keenlyside. I'm the chair of the member community. We have Carl Vayette, who's the vice chair of this community, and Eric Poirier, the chair of the communications that put on these meetings on behalf of Building Smart. If you have any questions or any ideas or would like to get involved, feel free to email us at information@ibc-bsc.ca. We're using GoToWebinar. If you're not familiar with this tool, right now everyone is muted. If you would like to ask a question, feel free to either raise your hand with the raise hand tool or type in a question in the chat box, and we'll try and address that either during or at the end of this presentation today. A quick little update, our member community is currently at 285 members. This is mostly across Canada, but we do have some international members. We have our affiliates program. That's where we're able to link in and help support existing BIM community groups around the country. We have a few in development and hopefully some news on that in the coming future. Overall, whether it's through our affiliate program, links with researchers, with industry, with government, we're looking to build and are succeeding in building a national network of excellence overall so that we can all advance forward together. So our meetings we have once a month. We've divided this into 3 different topics throughout the year. Today will be our last presentation on the topic of a national BIM mandate for Canada. Next month, we will get into talking about open BIM in depth, using some very concrete examples, and towards the end of the year, starting in September, looking at BIM adoption and implementation in Canada. So overall, through this trimester, we've been looking at some key elements to head towards a national BIM mandate for Canada. We have our roadmap published. We're questioning, are we ready for a BIM mandate? How do we structure it? Who else has done this? What does a mandate entail? And what are our priority areas for a national mandate? Starting in January, we had presentations from Eric Poirier, who presented the roadmap. He also presented on whether, are we ready? We have some data from surveys that we've conducted at past events, and the vast majority of you do believe that we are ready. Eric also presented on some of the initiatives and precedents that are being set around the world, and today's presentation will also speak to that. In February, we looked over more on the home turf. We see some organizations doing projects with BIM as part of that, but as separate initiatives. We have no formal policy mandating BIM implementation on public projects in Canada. And last month we had a presentation from Bilal Sukar and Mohammed Qasim, and amongst the various slides and data that were presented, certainly this slide for what they have proposed in Brazil shows a pragmatic approach to steps we can take towards a mandate in a realistic sense. So without further ado, we're very pleased to welcome David Philp, Scottish BIM Delivery Group Chair, to speak to us today around the topic of the top 10 things to do to get a government mandate. So thank you, David, for joining us today. The floor is yours.
and which is it lets me see all the good things that are happening around about the world. What we are seeing is very much lots of programs, not just in the context of BIM mandates, but more and more national BIM digitisation strategies. We were recently across over in Australia, and again, the same questions are being asked. You know, what should it be? Should it be a mandate, or should it be something that's perhaps more pragmatic? And if you look at that, whether you can still hear me, isn't this audio okay?
You're cutting in and out for me.
Okay, I shall keep going anyway. What we are seeing is when we go around in the world that this thing we call traditional construction is being drastically reshaped. And we're probably seeing two forces being applied, and it was evident last week. Okay, I'm going to switch my video off for 2 seconds. Okay, I've switched my video camera off, so hopefully it's a better audio quality now. So what we're seeing very much in all these programs round about is the fact that we're seeing more and more a shift towards advanced manufacture and build off-site. And on the other side, we're seeing the digital construction economy. We're also seeing a lot of people not talking about BIM in the context of purely geometrical and non-graphical information, but more and more discussions around about what the new business models look like. I think that's really important when you look at the importance of actually getting a mandate. Within the UK, the discussion was very much in terms of the economic imperative for BIM, and actually very clear and concise messaging about the value. In the UK, it was very simple. It's actually say between 15 to 20%. So if you're saving 20%, buy 5 assets, get 1 free. Very clear message. But what we are seeing in all these programs is a shift away from traditional construction towards a more advanced Industry 4.0 model, which we're seeing being manifested very much in Germany. What we are seeing as well, if you, sorry, is right across the world, and this is a slide, that there's now a European Union BIM task group that's trying to harmonise, if you like, the national BIM efforts to bring a common European approach. And in terms of getting ready for BIM, we see this as really critical, trying to get everybody together and having very clear public drivers for change. And I think that was one of the things in terms of getting the mandate in the UK, was having very clear why, and answering that why question was very key. And one of the key things, if you have a look in terms of the investor report for the UK, was actually trying to make sure there's a very clear return on investment from an economic perspective. What we are seeing in terms of public drivers, and again, starting to put pressure for mandates, public budgets under pressure. So it means there's not having to be new efficiency and reform, and how BIM can help support that one. We're seeing more and more critical need for more intelligent infrastructure that's supported by good quality data. Increasingly, we're seeing environmental and energy demands and how we can start to use our model simulation to start to improve, especially upon that embodied and in-service carbon agenda. And at the same time, BIM is becoming a catalyst to stimulate innovation. And we're seeing mandates coming more and more, not just about BIM, but how it supports modern methods of construction, especially build off-site. Some of the key figures, and again, in terms of looking at a mandate, these are things we have to consider. So within Europe, the average, if you like, in terms of gross domestic product of actual construction is around about roughly 9.9%. So it's got a huge imperative in terms of the economy. It employs around about, on average, 15 million people. So you think about how many people have got to upskill and get ready. And at the same time, it's mainly made up by small to medium enterprises. Roughly 95% within Europe are small organisations. But we also have to think in terms of the mandate, how do we make sure that we can start to upskill them as well? Now this is a key figure, and this is one of the key figures actually why we got the mandate. 35% in terms of recognised waste, in terms of process through that project life cycle that can be improved upon. Well, why? Pretty much a lot of times in terms of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and one of the things we did recognise in terms of apply was often recreation of data as we go through different stages of the work. And I think one of the big things we recognise that actually was contributing to it was very much poor or often no information management, both within client bodies and indeed within the sector as well. So within Europe, you can start to see in terms of having that clear roadmap, and I think it's essential to be able to conceptualise the journey plan. You can see they're very clear targets going through towards 2020, and as that world of digital starts to come into our world of construction and operation, we start to see the idea of trying to become more efficient, productive, transparent, and indeed how open shareable data can start to give us better value for money, better carbon decisions, and better growth. So not just in the UK, but in terms of Europe as well, so people start to think more and more about, should it be a mandate or should it be something that's maybe a more pragmatic framework? But we are starting to see more and more of harmonisation, and I'm sure many on the call know one of the key things that should be published next year is ISO 19650, which will help harmonise standards for information management. But we are starting to see across Europe trying to foster more and more that world-class digitised public body. And I think in terms of the mandate as well, think not just about design and construct, but think more and more about optimisation of the full life cycle. And we've seen that very much within the UK, thinking more and more about total expenditure thinking and how data can support that decision-making process. And again, having very clear purpose about that improvement and really giving, if you like, the taxpayer better value for money through that public purse. I'm going to focus a bit in terms of Scotland. Scotland has quite a different, in the UK we've got HM government, especially England. In Scotland, you know, we've had a look at ourselves in terms of our mandate and how we approach it. It started back in 2013. We had a review of public sector construction within Scotland. And I think that's important in terms of, you know, any mandate or any policy lever. It should always form part of a wider strategy. And you can see there one of the key recommendations from the Scottish Government is BIM should be introduced in all centrally procured projects. But you can see there there's a certain word within there, where appropriate, back to being pragmatic as well. So not essentially a mandate for level 2 in all projects, but level 2 where appropriate. We'll come on to mention what that actually means. Well, why do it? The key drivers were, you know, the Scottish Government had wanted it to become policy. There was an endorsement from government supporting a digitised process. It was recognised within the strategy that there benefits both, if you like, not just to the client, but also wider benefits to industry as well. And at the same time, we're seeing more and more national and international momentum for BIM, and we realise that actually if Scotland wants to be part of this, we've got to start the journey and help to start to push, if you like, supply chain in terms of getting readiness. Or, potentially, we face a two-tier approach. In terms of benefits, you can see in Scotland we've approached it very much from a total expenditure point of view. And I think it's clear in terms of either a mandate or however your policy should look, again, to be able to articulate these benefits. So for us, it was very much about collaborative working, early engagement of operational teams, and putting a focus on digital asset information management. And in Scotland, that's been a very clear part. We're focusing very much on the operational benefits. And we see BIM being able to help us visualise and test, especially from that life cycle stages, especially from operation. We're seeing more and more, and again trying to articulate as part of our plan, in terms of our policy, how we can actually get these real benefits. And we see actually better package procurement, better data, and actually reducing risk. We're also focusing very much on that point between capital expenditure and operation, trying to make sure we can move our data right the way through. And we're also looking at the open formats that we should be doing for that. We think in terms of buildings, it's very clear in terms of our BS 1192 Part 4 and the use of COBE. But again, we're questioning it in terms of infrastructure, what we should be doing in terms of that. Is the IFC mature enough? Should we be looking at other things just now? But ultimately, we're using our data to try and get better data to support a decision-making process. and ultimately it's about better outcomes, moving from output to an outcome focus for Scotland. We see a real opportunity in operational lifecycle, and again, unapologetically, it's a key thing we wish to focus on. We've seen many things in terms of actually, I'm sure many folk saw Global Construction Review where the mouse ate, if you like, all the legacy drawings that, typically down in the basement. What we are seeing, and we're trying to encourage more and more, a systems optimization approach. And there we sort of touches into level 3 and start to think about telemetry within our systems as well. I'm sure many of you may have seen this before, but we found it very clear, it was very important as part of our policy to try and make sure that our politicians really understood where the value was coming from, very clear economic value proposition. And you can see there, in terms of level 2 BIM, we've got in terms of 20% cost within delivery and 80% in operate. So again, we have to make sure we're focusing on both of these areas, but especially operations. And what we did see is we need early FM engagement, because 80% of the whole life cost will be fixed in that first 20% of the early design process. So a key part of our targets was to make sure that we're involving operation right at the very beginning of the briefing and design process. So we're aiming for as a target level 2 BIM in Scotland, where appropriate, and alternative procured projects. We're also thinking about that longer term shift as well to level 3, where we're thinking more and more about performance and operational data. And one of the things we're doing as part of our policy next Tuesday is we're working with many government organisations across the globe, including Germany with the 4.0 programme, to try and make sure that we future-proof our programme and think about longer term growth within there as well. But this slide was very clear to our politicians to actually show the value proposition, both in terms of the savings, but also it became a good platform to show some of the social benefits as well. But we know the real magic happens when we think about that operational perspective. You can see there, and this is a key thing in terms of making sure we had a strong implementation plan that would reflect any policy. And as you're doing in Canada, having a clear roadmap for procuring authorities to follow that's going to be consistent and very much action-based. This breaks down our implementation plan, and again, this may be your next stage in terms of your own roadmap. We broke it down, if you like, into a series of what we're calling our horizons. We started with policy. We used the word mandate. We didn't know if it was going to be a mandate, and we'll talk about more and more where we're going with that, but setting out clear objectives and actually giving the supply chain time to get ready as well. Within Scotland, we had an ambitious programme around about 400 days. Whereas in HM government down south, it was closer to 1,500, so a very rapid, if you like, time to put our policy in place. We're mobilised, we've thought in terms of governance and working groups. We're also done research to make sure we've put lenses to see what's the best practice from other parts of the around about as well. We've spent a lot of time in education and training, and this is one of the big things that supported our policy as well. This week alone, we've finished doing, I think it's around about 500 training of public sector employees in Scotland. We've also got a series of Pathfinder projects that we're learning from as well, both in terms of new build, heritage projects, vertical and linear, just to make sure that what we are proposing for guidance fits very much within a Scottish vernacular. And we're moving on to our guidance as well, which will be shaped to some extent with Pathfinder projects and the work from others as well. And by April 2017, we'll launch the programme. So we're giving the industry plenty of time to get ready and doing lots of outreach as well. And again, this is one of the key things for our policy, was having a very clear implementation plan. And we're very much on course just now as we move to 2017. So again, making sure you've got a very clear implementation plan that backs up your strategy and policy. Again, one of the things I think it's very keen to do as well, and I think this is one of the things for us that really helped in terms of, I don't want to use the word mandate for Scotland, but in terms of policy, we wanted to communicate key principles. Very clear communication was essential. When we talk to politicians, they're not interested in the technical aspects. It's got to be very articulate in terms of the value proposition. So we talked more about information management than we did in terms of the technical aspects of information modelling. So very clear communication of the value proposition in a way that our politicians could very clearly understand the value proposition. Our approach to implementation, I think this is something to really focus on in your journey in Canada. We mentioned that Scotland wanted to be where appropriate. So the first thing that we done in terms of our policy was to ask the when question, what level of adoption or grading is appropriate? So what we've done, and this will be part of our, if you like, our strategy, and it'll ultimately become part of our policy, is to make sure our public sector clients are not mandated to do level 2, and again that's why I didn't want to use the word level 2, but where appropriate. So we have built an online grading tool that lets our organisations put their project data in, their project values, and what it does, it looks at use cases, and the algorithm grades it in terms of a level 0 to level 2, so where appropriate. We've also done in terms of asking, so we know when should I adopt level 2 BIM or level 1. We've also spent a lot of time, this is still ongoing, to create like what we call our benefits tool, that shows the quantum of saving and additional qualitative benefits of BIM for that project as well. So for a procurer, they've got an idea in terms of well-informed decisions to what level of BIM, and they've also got a return on investment to make sure there's a positive within there, and ultimately how to do it. So what we are doing is to make sure that we also have very clear guidance that's actually linked to the appropriate level of BIM as well. So our approach to implementation was very much about appropriate. What's appropriate in terms of the level of capability and the data use for that client, rather than just purely mandating level 2. Because what we know for some, especially our local authorities, actually at a level 1 starting point might be a very good starting point. And there you can see there, that's the, if you like, the blow-up, if you like, of our return on investment summary or our benefits calculator. But it helps the projects work out in terms of having clear purpose for the data and actually trying to put, if you like, a range in terms of quantitative benefits, in terms of clear range of saving. And also it's clear as well to make sure that it shows the potential investment from the client perspective as well. So we're working on this just now. And one of the key things, and I think it's key in terms of, again, the to-do list, is to make sure that you've got a very clear benchmark as to where your starting point is from cost or program level, to make sure you can actually measure the benefits. So what we've seen, in terms of the 4th of April 2016 with HM government, the mandate has now happened, so it's becoming business as usual. But what we did see in terms of the HM government programme, it makes sound economic sense. I'm sure many of you know, down in London and England, it was more a case of actually level 2 was mandated, whole sector, by 2016 April off. So that's now happened, and you can see the policy document there. But one of the key things to think about, it was part of a wider programme. So again, it was part of a wider strategy. I think that's very key to think about not just BIM, but how it fits with other parts as well. So we have key things within there, such as project bank accounts. We also had soft landings within there. And having clear stage plan alongside that mandate that was measurable was very key. We also said, as we mentioned, we saw the strategy down south as part of BIM, as part of the bigger picture. We had other initiatives as well, as you can see on the screen: collaborative procurement, early contractor engagement, benchmarking, lean delivery, start to think about modern method construction, all equally part of that programme. So not about BIM in isolation, but thinking about BIM as part of a wider part of that mandate. And the savings were real. You can see there in terms of, this is over since really around about 2010 to 2011 when the government department started, to in terms of where we are now. So the savings, which were benchmarked, and I think that's a key thing in terms of the mandate as well, to make sure we had a body, we had a trial project delivery support group that measured the projects that were going through. And you can see there in terms of savings, and these are purely within capital expenditure between the 2011 benchmark, which was normalised for inflation, savings ranging between 12 and 20% that are regularly being cemented. Not just within the design and construct, but within the project briefing and the business case as well. And we're now looking at longer term savings towards 33% over the whole project life cycle. But again, these were key testing the hypothesis that was set out within the mandate. We're also seeing it as well. This is a different opportunity as well. High Speed 2 It's going to be the biggest project within Europe when it kicks off. And they're looking at, again, in terms of their policy, making sure that, they can drive real value and having real vision. And I think this is a big part. And again, we mentioned in terms of, mandate, having clear communication. This is the vision in terms of high speed too. It shows their digitization journey and some of the key milestones. And I think, again, in terms of mandates, just having clear visuals that people understand. And you can see the right-hand side, that the path, without them, that world, if we lived in analog, what did that mean? It was a very clear picture that people clearly understood. And if you look about halfway, just the right-hand side, you see a little red devil, if you like, at the turnpike. And then for them, it was also about behavioural change as well, and thinking about that within the strategies. But a very clear way of showing what their policy was as well. Again, I think one of the key things, if you look back in terms of success of the UK BIM programme, was having very strong leadership from senior members of both politicians and indeed some industry leaders as well. And having them on side to get that mandate in place was especially key. And I think being able to think more and more in terms of focus, not just on the creation of data, but the whole asset information as part of the strategy is key. And you can see there, in the context of high speed 2, thinking very much about that digital railway, and that right at the heart of it, the whole proposition of taking a digitised, if you like, asset management strategy. And again, really key right about it as well. Now, interesting enough, in terms of high speed 2, they have already banked £500 million of savings as part of their strategy. And again, that was one of their key reasons as to why to do it in terms of their policy. And again, they were very good, and I think this is a key part as well, and we've done this in Scotland, is trying to measure the value, having very clear benefits set out in terms of how that saving is going to be realised. Again, also having a very clear timeline. You can see in terms of the UK, this is a key part of informing our mandate as well. A journey plan that shows a transition, moving from that world of, as we all know, from level 0 to level 1. Now, I think this is very key as well, getting that foundation right in terms of level 1. Think about common data environment and design management before we move to level 2 with all the parametric and information management. It was also really essential that we gave, if you like, clear signposting to industry that it doesn't stop there. We've got longer term, the world with the holy grail of level 3 and that integrated real-time data exchanges. So again, having, as you're doing in Canada, having a very clear roadmap that was backed up by our standards was very clear. But moving from output-based to outcome-based is going to be key. And what we are seeing as we shift through it, we're being very clear in terms of measuring that process waste as well that's getting stripped out. I'm a great believer in the journey planning, and this probably takes it, and it shows an example of what the department's done in the UK, longer term planning. So it wasn't just a case of doing level 2 BIM overnight, but very clearly putting in the artefacts. This was an environment agency within the UK, do things such as flood defences. And you can see within there, they started off looking at the legal piece, trying to solve the protocol, thinking about the legal and commercial and where BIM sits within the contract hierarchy. They then thought about having a common data environment across their enterprise, and then moving across to they've also got longer term, and you can see that it's moving from the world of BIM to digital engineering and move to level 3 BIM progressively, and moving from CapEx savings to longer term savings where we're thinking more and more about performance-based data as well. So I'm getting these real digital efficiencies in there. So level 2 BIM, well, what does that look like? And I think one of the things that really helped us with the mandate was thinking about having clear standards that sat behind it, making sure there was a very clear way of getting consent. And you can see there within the UK, in terms of achieving level 2, we've now got 5 key standards there. And actually one of the things, again, I think is really important, when we're looking at the mandate, it was very much about being free as well. So the UK government paid for licenses for all the standards to make sure that actually those are freely available for us. Again, we talked about SMEs, making sure we actively engage them as well. We also built a network, what we call our BIM4 network, looking at all the different practices to make them sure they were aware of the standards and help them put them in place. But we've now got, as we came to April this year, 5 standards to underpin, ensure consistency of approach in both the asset delivery phase and operation as well. And they're helping us make sure we've got consistency of approach and handover. And again, they underpin that business case. I think at the heart of it as well was the early publication of PAS 1192. I'm sure many of you may have seen it already, but thinking more and more again about information management. You may have seen this slide before, but as we came to really what, and I think it's key to actually set out what does good look like at the end of the journey. And for us it was about an employer that is very consistent about putting good quality employers' information requirements out into the marketplace, getting sure there's that assessment and need clearly articulated. A supply chain that's very good at responding with BIM execution plans. Again, one of the key documents for us as well was the Master Information Delivery Plan, making sure we can tangibly set out all the information needs. A big part as well was the whole processing map of that project lifecycle, making sure we can understand when information is required and being able to articulate the right amount of data. So clear standards again underpin the mandate, making sure we could consistently move information through a whole project lifecycle. One of the things as well that helped, again if you go back to the business case, was the creation of level of definition. In the UK we've decoupled, if you like, graphical and non-graphical detail, so we may have different levels. You can see from our cross-sale project what this has looked like in terms of the importance of the data, and we can see within the UK we've seen a huge, if you like, value case for the non-graphical information. And what we're seeing is we move, if you like, from our delivery phase into our operational phase. It's important we can set that right. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how we describe data, and one of the things that was built to support was what was called the NBS BIM toolkit, that digital plan of work to help describe and create a digital employer's information requirement, all key part of the journey plan. There was also a focus, and this is part again with Scotland putting the spotlight on, is our operational life cycle. Really key thinking about that, thinking about what organisational requirements. And you can see within the UK where the spotlight was, we start actually looking at organisational information requirements to support the asset management strategy. Thinking also about these discrete pieces of information that need to be maintained, the asset information requirements. Thinking about starting very much with the end in mind. Thinking about that creation of that asset information model. And that was key in terms of the Scottish journey plan, was putting very much that spotlight, again as we mentioned, on soft landings and their operational life cycle, and how that's then procured through the capital expenditure stages. So thinking very much about operation as well to be key. And also fitting in with other documentation such as ISO. One of the things that we've done as well, and this is a part of, this was an early sort of thing, this was pre our policy, working out, trying to look at what the Scottish life cycle looked like in key projects, what the typical information requirements were, and started thinking more and more about the information exchanges as well. Again, I think it's a key thing to do. Start to think there might be worth, trying to do some early pilots, as you put together your business plan as well. Start to work out been key to make sure everybody can play their part. It's been a clear way for making sure that especially our product manufacturers got an easy way ensuring they can get product data, tags and serial numbers into the model. So we've actually found that this is probably one of the most challenging parts, but again it became a great way in terms of the business case to make sure that everybody could play their part without a big investment cost. So it also came a great way for us to think about data validation as well. So it was a key part, and obviously a big part of our programme, both in Scotland and HM government, was very much thinking about open, shareable data standards. So Kobe has been very much key to the programme, and it's also helped stimulate lots of, if you like, good innovation out there as well. So it's been a key part, making sure we've got good structured data. And we know eventually move on as we move towards level 3, but again, it's sort of thinking more data-centric, and clients making a lot more time to think about their data schema right at the beginning of the project. One of the key things we mentioned in terms of Scottish journey was put again that focus on the whole soft landings process, and this is one of our key standards within here. Starting to think about how we brief right at the very beginning for better facilities management or operation. One of the things we see as well is thinking more and more about actually giving our clients or customers the asset they want, making sure we don't drop the baton between key project stages. And whilst this can be uncoupled from BIM, BIM powers it, and this is a key part of both programmes in terms of Scotland and HM government. A bit better in terms of a process, where we start off ensuring there's a soft landings champion, someone from operation that can bring past experience to the project. We have regular audits and reviews of the model to make sure it performs well from an operational against the brief. We also make sure that we can use the model and the data for operational readiness and checking as well. And we also use all that data to make sure that we can start to get initial aftercare and fine tuning before moving into that post-op. But you can start to think about future proofing as well. So we've now got, if you like, a concept of the digital built Britain. In the last budget is being funded again, so we're starting to moving away from collaboration to that world of integration, building a business plan. It supports our longer term government commitments, and again, in terms of any mandate, I think it's really important, clear, simple targets. Within our level 2 programme, the target was as simple as level 2 BIM by 2016 and make savings of between 15 to 20%. So clear targets as part of any mandate is essentially really key. And again, you can see our next stretch targets as we move towards 2025, move away from savings of 15 to 20% in CapEx to moving more and more towards that 33% in operation. And you can see there the key construction now as we're thinking about level 3, again, future proofing of programmes, thinking more and more about performance and operational management. Also starting to think about the new skills as well. And one of the things that we did consider, again, as part of both programmes, is thinking about education, training, and the involvement of academia within programmes as well. I think about the upskilling requirements that are going to be required as part of the programme as well. So with both programmes, very good involvement and encouragement of academia and the formation of a BIM for Academia group to make sure that we can involve all these communities. So we're moving towards level 3, we're moving up the ramp, and I think that's what we are starting to see. It's a continuous journey, and again, I think that's been really important. And again, we're going through new challenges. Level 3 is not fully defined or briefed as yet, but you can start to see, we're thinking more and more about performance, we're thinking about technology such as Internet of Things, more about interoperability and real-time data exchanges. And we've got some huge challenges as well, thinking about new forms of contract that will support this new digital way of working. You can start to see our transition in terms of a roadmap from a technical and commercial perspective. Level 3A starting to, if you like, starts to become more and more also an optimized level 2. We're thinking more and more shift from COBie to IFC data exchanges. At this moment, level 2 within the UK, we package things differently. We've got geometry packaged through the model, and our non-graphical detail packaged through COBie. So bringing that together to enhance improvements in level 2. We move to level 3B, where we're thinking more and more, especially in infrastructure and geotechnical, and thinking in terms of the dictionaries and ontologies. And we're also thinking commercially about the new forms of contract that will be required as well in terms of operational. We also think in terms of developing new business models by level 3 as well, and thinking more and more about the Internet of Things and the telemetry, and again associated security around about that. Before we start to think about the whole world of semantic contracts and the whole internationalization as well. Well, what we're seeing, just to finalise off, we're seeing more and more to that concept of giving our assets our brains if we move into level 3. We're hearing more and more about real-time data analytics. We're seeing more about computer learning within there as well. So we're thinking about more and more about assets that are looking for that pulse check, that continuous refinement of the look, but more and more about real-time data exchange. And again, just to final, these are some of the key things that we're starting to see. So it's worth sort of summing up some of the key things that we've said. Having that key clear business case is essential. Economic key. And also with the supply chain as well. We mentioned our BIM communities, making sure that we have local outreach as well has been key. And also making sure that we constantly refine the programs that goes as well. Learning lessons from trial projects, hugely important. But getting that message right is so important, making sure it's not a technical message, but very much an economic imperative. So I think we come to the end of our time. So Susan, thank you for letting us present.
Absolutely. I think we're having still some sound challenges, but certainly a lot of what you presented today is very useful and pragmatic, as you mentioned. Eric, can I ask you if there are any questions that have been submitted that we'd like to address right away?
We'll open up the floor. I have one question here from James Madigan. James, I'm going to unmute you so you can get ready to ask your question. You're unmuted.
Hello?
Yes, James, you're on.
Am I coming through?
Yep.
Thanks. I'd like to know how much buy-in or how easy was the buy-in from the industry, both the architects, engineers, and constructors into the standards for BIM?
It's a very, very good point, James. What we had within our standards is we use the concept of a PAS, that public accessible specification. So there was engagement and there was a consultation with the supply chain. We actually, one of the things that facilitated that was we created what we called our BIM 4. So we've got 40 of them within the UK now. So we had BIM for clients, BIM for small to medium enterprises. That allowed a coordinated response to the standard. So when a standard was about to come out, what we endeavoured to do was to make sure it was cascaded through all these communities of practice. We created standard packs, and we've created networks throughout the UK to get an early sort of gauge, of any issues that were coming back, sort of thing. So we created very much a network come back. So there was very good engagement from industry, and I think the good thing about it was we made sure when we were presenting it out, it was our peers we were speaking to. So we enabled, if you like, others to go out and deliver the message. So, it was architects speaking to architects, engineers speaking to engineers as well. So making sure that there was forums for people to discuss and bring back. So I think we've been quite lucky in terms of, I wouldn't say lucky, I think we've done a good job in terms of bringing these communities of practice together. And the good thing is that, they continue to grow as well. So yeah, to answer the question, good engagement, but we created these forums for that engagement to happen in.
Thank you.
We have a question here online about intellectual property and how has it been dealt with in the UK and in Scotland.
It's a very good question. So we mentioned in terms of level 2 as 5 standards round about it. We also have a series of tools that support its implementation. Now, from a commercial and legal point of view, we have a potential. It doesn't have to be used for level 2. But the Construction Industry Council created a BIM protocol to help, if you like, inject level 2 BIM into the contract hierarchy and into the design appointment. Now, that deals within there what the data is going to be used for, and if the client wants to use it under license or to actually buy the data outright. In certain cases, such as the Ministry of Justice, they have on occasion bought and paid for the IP. Maybe it's to build a library of kit of parts for the prisons, because it's usually repeatable. So we've found that the use of the protocol, it helps clearly set out at the beginning how the data is going to be used, and it sets out all the IP issues as well. Now, one of the reasons why we went for level 2 at this point in time as well is it's still very much working in domain models, so there's no over one model. So it was commercially pretty much the same as before, sort of thing. And in their protocol, it's helped set issues around about IP within there as well. So it becomes a great way, if you like, of identifying right at the beginning and making sure there's consistency and buy-in right at the beginning of the project.
Excellent, thanks. Are there any other questions? While I wait, I do have one question. I think it's the question. How much was invested by Scotland and by the UK government in this effort?
Oh, okay. It's a good question. Now, the programs are quite different in nature because obviously the program, if you like, within HM government in England was obviously creating the standards within there. So a lot of money went into standards. And I think I'm trying to remember from memory, but I think the whole programme for level 2 was around about 4 million. Up in Scotland, because the standards are already built and created, we don't have to build upon that one. So in Scotland will probably be, in terms of roundabout, less than £200,000. So a bit of a difference in terms of programme size.
Excellent. And I do understand that the PAS past standards are going up for ISO certification. Is that correct? And when do you think that's going to be happening?
I believe that it will go out pretty soon to the mirror groups around the world. This is ISO 19650, and I think it's likely, again, the best of my knowledge, at some point in 2017, I think towards autumn.
Yeah, we apologize for the cutting in and out. I guess the pipe under the Atlantic isn't all that efficient. Waiting for David to come back on. I'm guessing, are there any other questions from, you can just raise your hand or write them in here. We have a question here, and I'll wait for David to get back on.
I'm online.
Oh, sorry, because it's cutting out. I have a question here. So I didn't get the end of the answer to the. I didn't catch the end of the answer. So yes, they are going to ISO. They'll be available. You're saying quite rapidly. And I guess we'll be waiting to see on our side what we can do with those. There's a question here about the greatest challenges that that you guys had to overcome to achieve the results and commitment they have today. So I think the very aggressive financial targets going from CapEx to TOTEX. What were the biggest, maybe the biggest challenge or the top three biggest challenges that you guys overcame?
Yeah, I think sometimes the biggest challenge is actually getting the foundation right. Just making sure that number one was a focus on level one BIM, to make sure that we had a common data environment in place, and making sure the right people were engaged as well within the program. Probably, I'd say the biggest challenge we had was with industry was COBie. The fact that we decided to go down, if you like, a very defined route for data exchange. So getting people to think about data and schema was probably one of the biggest challenges. I think it's fair to say as well that it sometimes comes cliche to say it, but behavioural change was obviously a big challenge as well. Getting people to think differently, to think more collaboratively in terms of what we're doing as well. But I think, how did we overcome that? And I think one of the big things is we went out and we met a lot of people. We made sure the program wasn't faceless, a bit like we're doing today. We shared the message. We created our BIM4 working groups to make sure. We also, we had really good leadership. I'm sure many of you know Mark View, who's chair of the UK government BIM task group. We had very clear leadership, both in terms of Mark as chair, which he still is, and from our senior politicians, and we also have the role of a chief construction advisor who helped us with messaging as well. So I think behavioural change was obviously a challenge, but again, our close working with industry helped that one. And I'd say, COBie became a challenge, but when we look how far we've came as well now, things like COBie and that, industry is really innovative in terms of how we do it. And so from a technical aspect, I think things went actually very well. You think where we are now, we're seeing lots of good quality employers information requirements coming out, and I think industry is seeing it more about information management than are in terms of the creation of digital models now, which is a hugely positive thing.
Excellent, thanks. There's a question here about noting the collective European Union BIM movement. Have you seen any or are aware of any similar collective movements elsewhere in the world?
It's a really good question. I think it's fair to say is yes. We've been across obviously in the US, we've got the BIM forum, but which is mainly a real mixture. But we've seen some clients within there, so probably nothing to that scale, to be honest. It's got very clear terms of reference, so I think it's quite a unique group. There is, we've been across in Australia, working with there. It seems to be very much, if you like, a New South Wales or such like at that level. So bringing together so many member states, probably not. But obviously the work that Building Smart does as well, we're seeing is helping bring people together as well.
There's a question around which is taking the lead in effective implementation. Is it vertical or horizontal projects? And why do you think it's one of the other? Who's taking the lead?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's fair to say at the beginning of our project, it was very much vertically driven. It was mainly buildings that were going through. However, I would say that we've had some amazing linear projects that.
David, we lost you at amazing linear projects. We'll hope you'll be able to start back from there. We're hanging on your.
Okay, amazing linear projects such as the hopefully by the time that help solve some of the issues. We also at that time created some specialist groups for infrastructure, BIM, including we had a COBie for all, which looked very much in terms of things like naming for the likes of civil and infrastructure projects as well. So we made sure there was a real focus. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing huge advancement in terms.
David, we lost you at huge advancements. You're cutting off at the right moments to keep us interested.
Apologies for that. So we're seeing likes of Environment Agency. We're seeing great processes from the linear nature. I would also say, I think, from a software point of view, we're seeing a lot of the technology now is catching up as well. There's equal amount of good quality technology support the linear marketplace as well. So there's been quite a bit of maturity within there as well.
Excellent. Well, we're almost at time. Well, thank you very much, David. And Susan, I'll let you take it away and finish off the presentation.
Sure. So yes, again, a great thank you, David, to for your presentation. I know we were challenged there a bit with the voice cutting out, but what you presented was very, very helpful. We do have on the agenda for next month a look. Again, we're moving into our second trimester of themes, looking at Open BIM in practice. And if you're not familiar yet already with the Quebec Airport Extension Project, you will be at this meeting where we'll see the use of BCF in an Open BIM workflow and how much efficiency that gained and success that had within that project. So we invite you back at the end of next month for that. And thank you very much for attending our meeting today. Again, if you have any questions or suggestions or would like to get involved, please write us at information@ibc-bsc.ca. And you can also visit buildingsmartcanada.ca for more information on all our activities. Thanks and have a good day.